talk about how you can have an always-on personal brand without actually being always on. Today I'm going to be sharing my top 5 tips for a digital detox. Grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. Research has shown that an estimated 210 million people are addicted to social media and the internet. Social media and the internet has brought us so many incredible things in our modern world. It has opened up so many opportunities for information and connection. But like with most good things, it can also have its downsides if not used in moderation or carefully. And social media usage, for example, has been linked to depression and anxiety. And you may have also experienced feelings of comparison and being stuck in this comparison trap when you have this hyperactivity of other people's highlight reels. So as someone who has a blog, a YouTube channel, a podcast, and who actively posts on LinkedIn, it was really important to me to develop a healthy relationship with social media whilst also building my professional personal brand online. And I did that through a philosophy that I learned about in Cal Newport's book, Digital Minimalism. In the book, Cal Newport says that the philosophy is a philosophy of technology use in which you focus your online time on a small number of carefully selected and optimized activities that strongly support things you value and then happily miss out on everything else. So this is a philosophy where you are leveraging technology for all that it can offer you while spending the least amount of time engaging with it. So let's dive into tip number 1. My tip number 1 is to feng shui your following list. This idea of a digital feng shui is not something that I actually ever thought about until I read a book that the tidying sensation Marie Kondo co-authored, and it's called Joy at Work. And in it, the authors discuss this idea that feng shui experts believe that it is important to also clear the energy related to your digital life. For example, to clear your inbox so that you can actually receive the kinds of emails that you want to be receiving. I thought this was really interesting because we often think about feng shui as being something that applies to the physical space. It's predominantly about the flow of energy. And it was really interesting to think about how this concept could be applied to the digital space as well. And I started to think about this beyond just an inbox. I started to think about applying this to social media too. Because something that I have done for a few years now is that every year, at least once a year, I try and go through my following list and disconnect with things that are no longer aligning with me, or that I have just outgrown an interest in that particular area, or maybe that relationship is no longer aligned with my life too. And what I notice is that in the times that I have done this, it gives me such a different feeling of energy when I go onto my feed. I suddenly feel not overwhelmed, but rather that I am seeing the things, to put it in Marie Kondo's words, that actually do spark joy. I'm seeing the things that I actually want to see more of. And as a result, you start to engage more with those things, and the algorithm starts to understand more of your goals in using the platform. So it is almost this really positive feedback loop. So I would encourage you to think about how you can feng shui your following list. This might be brands that you no longer align with that really helps you to highlight the ones that you most want to be supporting and contribute to, or it might also be relationships that you have now outgrown. My tip number 2 for your digital detox is to declutter your phone. When the world used to be a lot more physical, we would spend more time allocated to tidying up. We would actually have to spring clean our office or our desk, or spend time rearranging our files. But when we became more paperless, this is something that isn't as urgent for us because we don't have the need to find space, we don't have to think about our storage as much, and we don't have to have the unsightliness of paper. But when you actually do spend the time clearing your digital life, this can also have such a positive effect on your energy. Well, I know that it has for me anyway. And I always have spent a lot of time thinking about the way that I organize my files and my emails. I've always tried to be as organized as possible in those spaces. But something I didn't give enough attention to was my phone, particularly my phone screens. I actually didn't ever think that I had that many apps. I'm usually quite particular about the ones that I use and don't use. Last year, I gave myself the challenge of really trying to minimize the number of apps. I gave myself a target number of screens and a target number of apps, and it forced me to have to actually make the calls for things that weren't actually serving me. But what this did was really highlight the things that were, and my engagement with those particular things really felt positive. I had apps related to things that were aligned better with my goals. And once I did this, this really created such a different experience for how I was engaging with my phone and how I felt when I picked it up. But I also took this one step further, and I integrated the use of widgets into my home screens really strategically as well. And one in particular that was really important to me was the use of Pinterest. But I didn't just integrate Pinterest in a generic way. I linked my Pinterest widgets to very specific boards. For example, it might be linked to the board that I had created on healthy eating for everyday meals. And then this gave me inspiration for the food that I wanted to be eating on a day-to-day basis. And I would see that on my phone regularly. It also inspired me in some of my other goals. For example, it was linked to travel goals that I had or other aspirational areas. I also had boards that were linked to mindset. So I would see particular words or quotes or phrases that were aligned to my goals come up during my day as well. So I had this really nice combination of a minimalist screen, but also one that was quite inspiring. And this again links back to Cal Newport's philosophy. And in his book, Digital Minimalism, he says, cultivate a digital life in which new technologies serve your deeply held values as opposed to subverting them without your permission. Tip number 3 for your digital detox is to be omnipresent with the least amount of effort. How can your personal brand be everywhere without actually you feeling like you are stretched across too many things? When we see bigger creators, it can sometimes feel like they are everywhere all at once. And a lot of the time, this is because they have behind the scenes entire teams that are working on their personal brand. So while they might seem really relatable to you, they actually have a whole business that is built behind their brand that is making it possible for them to appear like they are everywhere. But when it comes to smaller creators, then you have to be a little bit more creative in how you are using your time to the optimal level while also leveraging all of the opportunities on the platforms that you want to be aligned with. And what I would recommend for this is to make your mantra to repurpose everything. If, for example, if you were to dedicate just a couple of hours to being relentlessly strategic about how you would repurpose every bit of time that you spent creating for social media into something that is going to give it further legs, then what are the opportunities that you might be able to come up with? And this is not about trying to extend yourself too far, but asking yourself if the work that you are already putting in can be, with just a few extra minutes, repurposed into something else as well. And it's also important to note that this isn't about just copying and pasting all of your content in the exact same format on different platforms, because different platforms have generally different audiences and purposes, and you should think about how you are tailoring each platform where relevant to be specific to a content strategy that works for your personal brand while also providing something unique to that audience. But just to give you some ideas of some of the ways that you might like to think about this repurposing strategy is to consider, for example, if you are creating videos that are a longer form video, to cut those videos into smaller clips. So maybe you don't have to necessarily re-record those clips, but you can cut them from your existing content. And then you might use that content for your YouTube shorts, you might use it on TikTok, you might use it on LinkedIn, for example. Or you might like to take the video that you created in a long form content format for the purpose of YouTube and extract the audio on that video without doing anything extra to it, and then using that audio to also create a podcast for you. Because keep in mind that people also like to consume content in different ways. While some people might like to sit in front of their computer screen or in front of their TV and watch YouTube videos, other people might like to get that same content in their car when they are driving to and from work via a podcast. So by repurposing your content in as many areas as possible, you also increase your opportunity to connect with different people's preferences. Some of the other ways that you might like to repurpose your content further is to, for example, if you do create a video or a podcast, to turn that into a blog or an article on LinkedIn, for example. Or if you already have a blog on your website, or if you post articles on LinkedIn, consider taking that article or that blog and turning it into a video format that can act as the foundation of your script for your videos or for your podcast. As another tip for repurposing, you could break down your key tips from your video, your podcast, or your articles and blog into key points, and then this could form the basis of a text-based or an image-based post on social media in a short-form content way. For example, you might just have a text-based listicle style post on LinkedIn, or you might take the key headlines from your blog or your article and turn that into more of a carousel style post on LinkedIn or on Instagram, for example. You might also, if for example you produce videos where you are often collecting a lot of B-roll footage for your videos, or you're taking photos for thumbnails so you can share those videos, you might actually create a bank of the content that you have collected for those things, and then they could also form another piece of content for you. So the photos that you collect for your thumbnails could be added to your carousel on Instagram. The footage that you collect for your B-roll for your videos might be something that you could combine to create an Instagram reel, for example. But it's really just a chance for you, when you sit down in those couple of hours, to think about all of the ways that you actually spend time creating content, and ask yourself if there is another way that you could potentially use this thing. If there is a graphic that you create, for example, for your videos or your social media posts, are you actually using that graphic in different places as well, and really leveraging the time that you have already put into it to optimize your return on investment for the time that you spend on social media or preparing for social media? And let's go back to how this links with this idea of digital minimalism from Cal Newport. If your personal brand of digital minimalism requires engagement with services like social media or breaking news sites, it's important to approach these activities with a sense of zero-sum antagonism. You want something valuable from their network, and they want to undermine your autonomy. To come out on the other side of this battle requires both preparation and a ruthless commitment to avoid exploitation. What is your ruthless commitment to your repurposing strategy in a way that you can have a healthy relationship with social media whilst also optimizing all of the opportunities that it has to present for you? Tip number 4 for your digital detox is to schedule everything. It is really easy to get addicted to something if you are exposed to something all the time. So if you can minimize your time on the platform, then this will help you to build a healthier relationship with that platform. So I take the opportunity wherever I can to schedule. I schedule my YouTube videos, I schedule my podcasts. Where I can, I'll schedule on LinkedIn as well. So when you consider your social media, ask yourself how you can minimize your touch points with social media so you don't find yourself stuck in a loop of having gone on the platform for one purpose but find yourself in a hole of scrolling through things that you weren't anticipating. Because keep in mind that social media platforms have billions of dollars dedicated to getting you to do this very thing. And on the topic of scrolling, what I personally try to do as well is that when it comes to me engaging in social media, personally in particular, or even professionally, I try and keep that to designated hours of the day. For example, I try and make sure that I am never on social media past 9 o'clock. It's something that I try and minimize in my life as much as possible. And though it does take a heightened level of discipline, I do try now more than ever to make sure that even if I am scrolling, to just give myself a couple of minutes here and there to do that. And I definitely try and keep any scrolling to times like lunch breaks, if anything, or after work hours. And ironically, the more time that I have spent using social media professionally, the less time that I have spent on social media personally, and I've developed a much healthier relationship with the platform in that space as well. And I don't ever find myself, as much as I used to, stuck in social media scrolling. It's not actually something I even enjoy. I prefer to spend time in other things. But if we are talking about social media, one platform that I find I love to use and I actually want to spend time in my downtime using is Pinterest, because I find that I can use Pinterest to actually align with my goals and the mindset that I want to have. It's a platform that I think scrolling can actually be, for me anyway, a really healthier approach to social media as opposed to some of the other platforms. Because I can be really strategic about what's on there, and I don't really see anyone that I know on there. I see things that are purely related to my aspirational goals. And my tip number 5 for your digital detox is to post and ghost. Now, I know this is the opposite to most advice that people give you in the personal branding or social media space. We're always told to not post and ghost because of how important it is to engage with people that might comment on your comments within that first hour and all of those other rules that you hear. And this was something that I used to think was important a few years ago, but now I actually just choose to not care about that at all, because I understand that social media platforms are designed to get people to be stuck in this loop. So they promote that that is the best way to engage on social media for your own engagement, because it also serves their purpose. It serves the purpose of you and everyone else being more engaged with social media for a longer period of time. So what I have found is that I prefer to post and ghost and then come back to any comments that I may have received in a designated time. And then I feel like I'm not just constantly in this reactive cycle to social media. I'm actually in a cycle that I feel like I have control over. And I also enjoy responding to comments more in that way too, because I can put myself in that mindset of really appreciating the comments that I have on things. And I think it also takes a different approach approach to social media and your mindset in general. And it becomes less about posting for this feeling of validation, to, see how your post is doing, if anyone has engaged with it, if they've commented on it, as opposed to you just creating for you, for the skills that you can develop as a part of that, and for the value that you are confident that it can provide to other people without you actually having to get that external validation and that dopamine hit straight away. And this reminds me of something that Andy Warhol famously said when he said, "Don't think about making art, just get it done. Let everyone decide if it's good or bad, whether they love it or hate it. While they are deciding, make even more art." I hope these tips might inspire you to have a healthier relationship with social media, whilst also leveraging it for the opportunities that it can provide you. For more ideas on some habits that might be keeping you stuck, then check out my previous episode on this topic. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.